The night I buried my husband, I still set 2 plates at the table. I told myself it was habit, but the truth was, I couldn't stand the sound of only one. Even now, years later, that silence feels louder than any song. My name is Diana Collins, and this is the story of a promise that refused to die, even when love was buried beneath a folded flag. Before I start, if you're new here, this is Possible Hearts, where we share stories about love that survives what life tries to take away. Make sure you're subscribed and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tonight's story, it's not just mine. It's for anyone who ever waited for someone who didn't come home. The studio smells like old wood and lavender. The mirrors are streaked with fingerprints, and the floor creaks where he used to step. I teach other people how to move. Brides, nervous grooms, teenagers preparing for prom. But I haven't danced for myself in over 6 years. The song he left me with still sits on my playlist, When I Come Home. I can't listen to it. Not anymore. He used to say that dancing was like faith. You had to trust the other person not to let you fall. And I did. Completely. Almost 4 years ago, the airport smelled of coffee and metal, that strange mix of goodbyes and recycled air. He stood there in his uniform, tall, handsome, too calm for what was coming. I told him something. I traced the edge of his dog tags. He smiled, that half smile that always made me feel safe. He said, "When I come back, we'll dance to our song. Just you and me. No audience, no clock, just us." I laughed, even though my throat was closing. "Then you better come back, Captain Collins." He leaned in and whispered, "Count on it, Mrs. Collins." That was the last time I saw him. The letter came 3 months later. Missing in action. Those words burned deeper than death. Missing meant maybe. Missing meant hope. And hope, when stretched too long, it can break a person. For the first year, I wrote him letters anyway. For the second, I stopped opening the mailbox. By the third, even the neighbors stopped asking how I was doing. They just gave me that look, the kind that says, she's still waiting. Lena was the only one who never gave up on me. She'd been through her own version of hell, her husband stationed overseas, constant fear wrapped in phone calls that never came on time. She was my anchor when I wanted to drift away. "Diana, you need to get out," she said one afternoon, plopping onto my studio floor with 2 cups of coffee. "You can't keep living in memories." I smiled weakly. "Memories are all I have left, Lena." "Not if you keep teaching others to make new ones," she said, gesturing toward the couples practicing in the back. "There's a charity ball next weekend for the families of deployed soldiers. You should come." "I can't," I said immediately. "You know I can't." She looked at me, her eyes soft but stubborn. "He wouldn't want you to stop dancing." The word "he" hung between us like dust in sunlight. She didn't say his name anymore. Neither did I. That night, I went home to the quiet house at the end of Willow Lane, the same porch light still flickering, the same photo frame beside the bed. Ryan's uniform hung in the closet, pressed and untouched. Sometimes I'd stand there just to smell the faint trace of him. Soap, leather, and pine. I turned on the radio hoping for distraction. Instead, it found our song. The first notes of When I Come Home filled the room, and I froze. I should have turned it off, but I didn't. I stood there, eyes closed, imagining his hand on my waist, the warmth of his breath near my ear. The room spun softly, not from motion, but memory. And when the song ended, I realized I'd been holding my hand out, waiting for someone to take it. No one did. The next morning, Lena texted,
"You're going. Saturday, 7 p.m., black dress. Don't argue." I typed back, "You're wasting your time." She replied with just 3 words, "Trust me, D." It's strange, the way life moves you even when you think you're standing still. By Friday, I'd said yes, not because I believed anything would change, but because saying no again felt heavier than saying yes. I didn't know it yet, but that single decision, the one I made just to stop disappointing my best friend, would lead me straight into the arms of a stranger. A stranger who somehow knew every step of my dance.
The night of the charity ball smelled like rain and second chances. I almost didn't go. My hand hovered over the doorknob for a full minute, wondering who I was trying to fool. Myself or the ghost I still lived with. But Lena was waiting in her car, headlights beaming through the drizzle. When I finally stepped outside, she grinned like a woman who had just won a bet. "You look stunning," she said. "I look desperate," I muttered. "Desperate's fine," she teased. "Desperate women start revolutions." I laughed, a small, reluctant sound. It felt foreign, like my voice belonged to someone else. Maybe that was the point. Maybe I needed to borrow someone else's courage for a night. The community hall was transformed. Strings of golden lights swaying above the dance floor, American flags hanging like soft reminders of both pride and pain. A band tuned up near the stage, the singer's microphone echoing faintly as she rehearsed "Stand By Me." I'd taught couples to move to that song before, but tonight it sounded heavier. Every lyric carried the weight of waiting wives, of hands held through screens, of promises whispered over static. I swallowed hard. "Just 1 hour," I whispered to Lena. "Make it 2," she said, slipping a volunteer badge around her neck. "You'll survive." I doubted it, but I stayed. Across the room, men in uniform mingled with their families. Some had medals. Others wore tired smiles. I watched a woman hug her husband so tightly, I thought they'd melt into one. It hurt, but in a quiet, forgiving way. Because that's what love does, even after loss. It hurts kindly. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Captain Ryan Collins stared at his reflection in the mirror of a dimly lit office. The scars near his temple were almost invisible now. But the eyes, those betrayed him. They'd seen too much. Major Davis stood behind him, arms crossed, voice low. "You don't have to do this tonight, son." Ryan buttoned his collar. "If not tonight, then when?" "She won't expect you." He smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe she'll dance with me before she remembers who I am." The older man sighed, stepping closer. "You sure she still wants that dance?" Ryan's hands stilled. "I promised her one, and I owe her that much." He straightened his jacket, took a breath that felt like a lifetime, and walked toward the storm. Back to the ballroom. The band played something slow and familiar. Couples swayed. I stood near the edge, half hidden behind a pillar, pretending to check my phone. Then a voice over the microphone caught my attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin tonight's main program, we have a tradition. Each year, we honor our heroes, both those who returned and those who still live in our hearts. If you've ever loved a soldier, this dance is for you." Applause scattered softly across the room. "So tonight," the announcer continued,
If you see someone standing alone, invite them to dance. Let no one stand without a partner. The crowd stirred. Someone brushed my shoulder. I turned and froze. A man stood there, tall, formal, wearing a dark suit and a small mask, one of those half masks the committee had chosen for the evening's masquerade theme. His eyes were shadowed, unreadable, but familiar in a way that made my heart skip. "May I?" he asked, offering my hand. Something inside me whispered no, but my body didn't listen. I placed my hand in his. His touch was warm, firm but gentle, and as he guided me to the dance floor, I felt my pulse stumble into rhythm with his. At first, we didn't speak. The music filled the spaces words couldn't reach. I focused on the steps, 1, 2, 3, but he led like someone who knew me. When he turned me under his arm, his hand brushed my back, and a chill ran down my spine. His scent, cedar, musk, and something faintly metallic, wrapped around me like memory. He leaned in just slightly, his voice low enough to drown in the music. "You move beautifully." I swallowed. "I teach dance," I managed to say. He smiled, almost wistfully. "Of course you do." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. The world around us faded. Lights, laughter, the murmurings of the crowd. All I could feel was the echo of a heartbeat that seemed to remember mine. When the song ended, he didn't let go. "Another?" he asked softly. I shouldn't, but my voice betrayed me. "Just one more," he whispered, "for memory's sake." And somehow I said yes. As the next song began, "When I Come Home," I froze. Every muscle in my body turned to ice. That song, our song, the one I hadn't heard since the day I lost him. I looked up at my partner. His expression didn't change, but his fingers trembled against mine. Something flickered in his eyes, a pain, a recognition, a plea. The air thickened with a silence I couldn't name. I wanted to pull away, to run, but I couldn't, because somewhere deep in my bones, I knew this wasn't just a stranger. The final chord echoed through the hall. The crowd applauded, oblivious. He stepped back, bowed politely, and disappeared into the crowd before I could even ask his name. I stood there, breathless, the ghost of his touch burning through my skin, and in that moment, one thought whispered louder than the music. He moved just like Ryan. I didn't sleep that night. The rain kept tapping against the window like an impatient heartbeat, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the stranger with my husband's rhythm. It wasn't just the way he led, it was the pauses. Ryan used to do that, those tiny hesitations that said, "I'm here, I've got you." And the scent, faint but real, cedarwood and metal. The same as the cologne I'd once tucked into his rucksack the night before deployment. I told myself it couldn't be, that I was clinging to ghosts, but ghosts don't make your pulse race. By morning, the studio felt emptier than usual. The mirrors reflected someone I barely recognized. Pale skin, dark circles, eyes haunted, not by grief, but by possibility. Lena burst in like sunlight with too much caffeine. "Okay," she said, hands on hips. "I want details. Every single one. You danced. You smiled. I saw you." I tried to sound casual. "It was just a dance." She narrowed her eyes. "Just a dance? Diana, you looked alive." Alive. I hadn't heard anyone describe me that way in years. She flopped onto the bench, watching me in the mirror. So, who was he? I don't know. He didn't say his name. I stopped. What? I met her eyes through the reflection. He moved like Ryan. Her expression softened immediately. Oh, honey. Don't oh, honey me, I said, more sharply than intended. You didn't feel it. You didn't see it. Lena reached for my hand. I know what it's like to want something impossible. Then tell me, I whispered. What if it's not impossible? She hesitated, searching my face. You think he's alive? I don't know what I think, I admitted. But last night, when he touched my hand, it felt like the world remembered something I'd forgotten. Lena said nothing, just squeezed my hand, her eyes glossy. Then, with a voice too calm to be casual, she murmured, Maybe you should come to the base tomorrow. There's an event for returning veterans. Some of the men are visiting before deployment rotations. I frowned. Why? Because, she said, standing and avoiding my eyes, maybe there's more you need to see. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the moment, the song, the dance, the way his voice dipped when he said, for memory's sake. If memory had a scent, a sound, a heartbeat, it was that. So the next morning, I drove to the base. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn day that smelled like rain on rusted metal. Rows of flags lined the path. Families walked beside soldiers, some holding hands, others holding photographs. I almost turned back, but then I saw Major Davis. He had attended Ryan's funeral, stood beside me when I couldn't hold myself up. Now he looked older, grayer, but his eyes carried the same warmth. Mrs. Collins, he said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to come, I admitted. I heard there was a veterans visit. He nodded slowly. That's right. A few of the men from overseas operations. Something flickered across his face. Hesitation, guilt, something unspoken. I tilted my head. Major, did you know Ryan's unit? He did, he said softly. Good man. The best. Did you ever... I stopped myself, afraid of the answer. He sighed, adjusting his hat. Sometimes the reports don't tell the whole story, Mrs. Collins. War doesn't end neatly, and neither does loss. His words lingered, not comforting, not final, just open. I wanted to ask more, but his phone rang and he excused himself, walking briskly towards the field tents. As I wandered through the courtyard, I caught sight of a familiar jacket, dark navy, simple, the same kind my masked stranger had worn. For a second, my breath hitched. He was standing near the memorial wall, hands in his pockets, head bowed. The wind lifted his hair, revealing a faint scar near his temple. My stomach flipped. "Excuse me," I called softly, stepping closer. He turned, but it wasn't Ryan. It wasn't even close. The man smiled politely, nodded, and walked away, leaving me standing there with a heart that didn't know how to beat anymore. That night, I dreamed of the dance again, only this time, when I turned in his arms, his mask slipped away, and there he was, Ryan, eyes full of apology, mouth forming the words, "I'm sorry it took me so long." I woke up crying. The next evening, Lena called. "Hey, you busy tomorrow?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean between my heartbreak and my hallucinations?" "Perfect," she said cheerfully. "Then clear your schedule. I'm picking you up at 6. "For what?" She paused. "Another charity event." I groaned. "Lena..." "Trust me, Di," she said again, her voice unusually steady. "Please, just trust me."
The following day, I sat at my vanity, brushing my hair, staring at the reflection of a woman who looked more curious than broken. Somewhere deep down, a fragile kind of hope was beginning to move again, like a pulse under the skin. I slipped on a soft blue dress, the one Ryan used to say made my eyes look like summer skies after rain. As I fastened the clasp around my neck, I whispered into the quiet room, "If you're out there, if you can hear me, just give me a sign." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low, deliberate, like a heartbeat returning. The next night, I saw him again. Not in a dream, not in memory. He was real, standing beneath the soft amber lights of the Veterans Hall, unmasked, alive, and looking straight at me. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He wasn't in uniform. No medals, no rank, no traces of the soldier I remembered. Just a man in a simple gray shirt, sleeves rolled, collar open, hands nervously twisting a paper program. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. That quiet blue, steady and storm-swept all at once. "Diana," Lena whispered beside me, "you okay?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. She followed my gaze, then pressed her lips together as if to stop something from escaping. "Lena," I said slowly, "what did you do?" Her voice cracked. "Just go to him." And before I could ask anything else, she slipped away into the crowd, leaving me alone with a heart that didn't know whether to run or fall apart. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, as if afraid I'd vanish if he blinked. So I did what my body decided before my mind could catch up. I walked. Each step echoed in the hall, swallowed by the hum of quiet conversations and clinking glasses. He looked taller, thinner maybe, his hair a little darker than I remembered. And when I finally stopped in front of him, he said my name again. "Diana." Just that. And my knees almost gave out. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a dream. It was him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to touch him to make sure he was real. But the words tangled in my throat. How are you here?" I finally managed. He exhaled shakily, his eyes glistening. "It's a long story." I stared, tears burning behind my eyes. "You died, Ryan. They told me you died." "I know," he said quietly. "They told me you did too." My breath caught. "What?" He nodded, voice breaking. "Our convoy was hit. I woke up in a field hospital weeks later, half my memory gone, half my body refusing to work. They said the camp was compromised, that communication lines were lost. By the time I was stable enough to ask for you..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "They told me there was nothing to go home to." My hands trembled. "So you just didn't?" he said. "I tried, but everything was classified. My name wasn't even on the active list anymore. They shipped me stateside for recovery under another identity. It took months to prove I was who I said I was." "And not once," I whispered. "Not once. Did you think to write? To find me?" He looked away. "I didn't want to show up like this. I wasn't the same man that left you." The silence that followed was unbearable. In the distance, the band began tuning instruments, the faint hum of strings filling the space between us. Finally, I found my voice again. "So, last night, that was you?" He nodded. "I wanted to see you before I spoke to you. I didn't know if you'd even want to look at me."
You wore a mask, I said bitterly. He smiled faintly. I thought it would be easier to hide the scars. I stepped closer. You think I care about scars? He hesitated. You should. I reached up, my hand trembling, and brushed the faint mark near his temple. His breath hitched. Does it hurt? I asked. Only when I remember. I didn't know if he meant the wound or the past.
The lights dimmed as the band began to play. Slow, haunting, familiar. Our song. Ryan glanced toward the stage, then back at me. I told them to play it, he confessed. I wanted to keep my promise. My heart stuttered. The dance you promised me, I whispered. He nodded once. If you'll have it. I could have walked away. I could have screamed or demanded every exclamation the last 6 years had stolen from me. But instead, I extended my hand. Then dance with me, I said softly, before the world wakes up again. He took my hand, and suddenly everything that had gone silent between us came alive again. His fingers fit where they always had. The music moved through us like a heartbeat rediscovered. When he pulled me closer, his forehead brushed mine. He dreamed of this. So did I whispered back. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. The music filled in the words we'd both lost. For the first time in years, I felt whole, even if only for a moment. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. He smiled. Small, real, fragile. Then he said something that sent a cold shiver through me. I'm leaving tomorrow. I froze. What do you mean? He hesitated, eyes full of sorrow. I'm being redeployed. My stomach dropped. You just got back. It's a short mission, he said quickly. Just logistics. No combat. But I heard the lie in his tone. I always could. Ryan, Diana, please, he said, his voice breaking. If I told you before, you wouldn't have come tonight. I just needed to see you once, to know you were okay. Tears burned behind my eyes again. You can't ask me to lose you twice. He took my hands, pressed them to his lips. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to believe. Before I could answer, someone called his name over the microphone. Captain Collins, you're wanted in the back. He looked at me, 1,000 words in one glance, and said, I'll find you before I go. And then he disappeared into the crowd, and I stood there under the lights, breathless and broken, realizing the cruelest truth of all. The dance he'd promised me might be our last. When he didn't show up the next morning, I told myself it was protocol. Soldiers don't leave explanations. They leave orders, paperwork, and silence. But deep down, I knew better. Promises don't vanish without a reason. The house felt smaller that day. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the ticking clock, even the kettle hissing on the stove felt like time mocking me. He'd been alive. I had held him, touched him, breathed him in. And now, nothing. Just like before. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faded stack of envelopes in the drawer. The letters I'd written after he was declared missing. I'd never mailed them. Never had the courage to burn them either. They began with hope. then grief, then fury, then nothing. I opened one at random. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and ink, time trapped between lines. Ryan, they said you were gone, but I don't believe them. I still make coffee for 2. I still hum our song when I clean the studio. I still wait. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe that's love. My handwriting wavered near the end, like I'd run out of strength before I ran out of words. That evening, I drove back to the studio. It was empty except for the echoes of old music and the faint shimmer of moonlight spilling through the windows. I turned on the stereo and pressed play. When I Come Home. The first few notes filled the room, fragile and forgiving. And then something on the floor caught my eye. A folded piece of paper. Crisp, new, not mine. I picked it up, my fingers trembling, and unfolded it. Diana, if you're reading this, it means I had to leave sooner than planned. I couldn't say goodbye again. Not like that. They've called me back for one final clearance mission. Nothing dangerous, they said. But you and I both know how words can lie. If I don't make it back, know this. You were the rhythm that kept me alive when the world went silent. I've never stopped dancing for you. R. My knees gave way. I sat on the floor, the letter clutched against my chest, and cried until the music ended. For days, I moved through life like a shadow, teaching classes, smiling when I had to, pretending not to glance at my phone every few minutes. Lena stopped asking questions. She'd just stay close, like she always did, baking too many cookies, bringing coffee I didn't drink, making sure I still breathed between sobs. But she knew something I didn't. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of guilt, that hesitation whenever Ryan's name came up. Finally, one night I asked, Lena, how long have you known he was alive? She froze, her spoon clinking against the cup. I didn't, she said quickly. Not until the night of the ball. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying, she whispered. But I knew something. Major Davis asked me to help with the event weeks ago. He said there was a surprise guest. He didn't say who. Her eyes filled with tears. When I saw him walk in, I almost fainted. But when I looked at your face, I knew I couldn't stop it. You needed that dance, Diana. My anger dissolved before it could even rise. She was right. I did need it. That moment of proof that love wasn't just something I imagined.
2 weeks passed. No word, no call, no letter. Every day felt like a waiting room where hope went to die quietly. Then, one morning, as I was locking up the studio, a familiar figure appeared by the door. Major Davis. He looked solemn, holding a sealed envelope. "No," I whispered. "Please, no." "It's not what you think," he said gently. "He's alive." My body nearly gave out from relief. "But?" I asked, because there's always a but. "He's in Germany. There was an ambush on the convoy, not his fault. He saved 3 men." I gripped the counter to steady myself. "When can I see him?" He sighed. "He's not ready. Physically, he's fine, but he asked us not to contact you yet." My throat tightened. "Why would he do that?" "Because he's scared, Mrs. Collins." "Of what?" "Of what comes after survival." That night, I sat on the porch steps, the envelope still sealed in my hand. The sky above Willow Lane was violet and bruised with clouds. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I spoke to the wind, like I used to when I thought he was gone forever. "You always run toward the fire, Ryan, and I keep standing here trying to build a home from ashes.
The porch light flickered, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. The same low heartbeat I'd heard the night I asked for a sign. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a single photo, a blurry shot of Ryan in uniform, smiling faintly at the camera. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were just 3 words: 4-hour dance. And that was when I understood. This wasn't an ending. It was a pause, a cruel, aching pause between verses of a song that hadn't finished playing yet. I didn't know when or how or if he'd come home again. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting. I felt like I was believing.
I almost didn't open the envelope. It sat on the kitchen counter for 2 full days, sunlight sliding across it like time trying to get my attention. The postmark said Fort Bragg, and the handwriting, his handwriting, was unmistakable. I told myself I was protecting my heart, but really, I was terrified of hope. On the 3rd morning, I finally tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Diana, they're letting me come home. Not for good, just for healing, they said. But I'll take it. There's a fundraiser at the Civic Hall next Friday. Same song, same floor. If you can forgive the distance between us, meet me there. Always your partner, Ryan. I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. Then I laughed, half sobbing, half disbelieving, because somehow the universe had given us a sequel. Friday arrived like the first breath after drowning. Lena insisted on curling my hair herself. No black this time, she said, tugging gently at a strand. Tonight isn't morning, it's motion. When I stepped into the mirror, even I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hope looked strange on me, too bright, too tender, but I wore it anyway. The hall shimmered with candlelight. A banner read, "Homecoming for our heroes." The same band, the same wooden floor polished to a shine, even the same song list. For a moment, I was back at the beginning, only this time, my hands didn't shake. Then, I saw him. No mask, no hesitation. Ryan stood near the stage, a single crutch under his arm, his uniform jacket open at the collar. The crowd parted around him like the tide making room for something sacred. Our eyes met, and every year between us collapsed. I walked toward him, slowly, deliberately, because if I ran, the moment might burst. He smiled that crooked smile I'd memorized, the one that said, "I'm home, but not whole yet." "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I whispered back. Up close, the lines around his eyes were deeper, the scar near his temple catching the light like silver thread. But his gaze, steady, unbroken, was still the same. "You came," he said. "You invited me." He chuckled under his breath. "I wasn't sure you'd still want that dance. I waited 6 years. You owe me a few songs." The band began tuning again. He offered his hand. I placed mine in it without thinking. When he pulled me onto the floor, the room hushed. Couples moved aside as if everyone somehow knew this moment didn't belong to them. The first notes of "When I Come Home" swelled through the speakers. And suddenly, we weren't in a hall full of people. We were back in that airport, in that promise, in every heartbeat we'd ever missed.
His hand found the small of my back, gentle but certain. "I thought about this," he murmured, voice rough. "Every night over there, I'd close my eyes and see you spinning in a yellow dress." I cracked at him, smiling through tears. "It was blue." He shook his head. "It's yellow in my memory. Sunlight, warmth, the reason I kept breathing." I pressed closer, feeling the steady thump of his heart against mine, proof that this wasn't a dream I'd invented out of loneliness. But even in the joy, there was a shadow. I felt the tremor in his hand, the stiffness in his step, the pain he tried to hide behind that brave smile. "Ryan," I said quietly, "how bad is it?" He hesitated. "They say I might not go back. Not because I don't want to, but because my body doesn't remember how to fight anymore." "Then don't," I whispered. "You've already won." He looked at me then, eyes glistening. "You really think so?" "I know so. You came back. That's the bravest thing you've ever done." The song slowed to its bridge, the part that always felt like confession. He leaned his forehead against mine. He whispered, "I'm sorry for the silence, for letting you believe I was gone. I forgave you before I knew you were alive, because love doesn't stop when the world does." He exhaled, shaking slightly. "I don't deserve you." I smiled through tears. "Then dance until you do." He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. And for a moment, the war, the hospitals, the letters, the waiting, all of it dissolved into rhythm and light. When the final chord faded, the crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Welcome home, Captain!" Ryan blushed, gripping my hand tighter. Major Davis appeared near the stage, eyes shining. He raised a glass. "To promises kept," he said. Everyone cheered, but I barely heard it. All I could hear was Ryan whispering, "Thank you for waiting." Later, after the lights dimmed and the hall emptied, we stayed behind. He limped slightly as we moved through the empty room, but his hold on me never faltered. I rested my head on his shoulder. "So, what happens now?" He smiled. "Now, we learn to dance without counting steps." I laughed softly. "That sounds hard." "Not if you trust me," he said. The same words he'd used all those years ago. We walked outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving everything silver and new. He tilted his head toward the sky. "Smells like home." I reached for his hand. "You are home." He squeezed my fingers, eyes searching mine. "You still have that playlist?" I nodded. "Play our song again," he said. So I did. Right there, under a flickering streetlight, we danced. No stage, no applause, no uniforms or titles, just two people finding their way back to the rhythm that once saved them. The wind brushed past like applause. The world kept turning, but slower, kinder. When the music ended, he didn't let go. He just looked at me, a little in awe, and said the words I'd waited years to hear. "I came home for our dance." I smiled, tears spilling freely now. "Then let's never stop." And we didn't. We swayed until the night folded around us, until silence itself became a melody only we could hear.
People think happy endings are loud, confetti, laughter, fireworks. But the truth is quieter. It's the clink of 2 coffee mugs at sunrise. It's a house that hums again. It's remembering how to breathe next to the person you once buried in your heart. Ryan moved into the little yellow house on Willow Lane in late spring. The grass had grown wild during all those years, but he said he liked it that way. Means the world kept living while I was gone. We took things slow. He woke from nightmares sometimes, and I learned to keep the lights low and my touch gentle. When my own grief flared, when I caught myself watching the door, expecting a folded flag again, he'd hold me until the ghosts quieted. Healing didn't look romantic. It looked like paperwork for medical benefits and grocery lists, and mornings when neither of us spoke until the coffee finished brewing. But in the silence, there was peace. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the porch polishing his old dog tags.
The sunlight glinted off the metal, catching the words, R. Collins, Faith Over Fear. I sat beside him, handing him lemonade. I said, "Still keeping them spotless?" He smiled faintly. "They kept me alive. Guess I owe them that." We sat in comfortable quiet for a while before I asked, "Do you ever wish you'd gone back?" He shook his head. "Every soldier does. For a while. Then you realize coming home is the hardest mission of all." He looked at me. "You saved me from disappearing again." I touched his arm. "No, Ryan. You came back on your own. I just left the light on." Later that week, I reopened the dance studio. For months, it had been a place of ghosts. Now it smelled like fresh paint and jasmine candles. Ryan insisted on helping, even with his legs still stiff. He swept the floor with dramatic effort until I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. "See?" he said, leaning on the broom. "Still got moves." I turned on the radio. Stand By Me floated through the speakers. He looked at me, eyes soft. "You teaching tonight?" I said. "Just one student." I took his hand. We danced, slowly, unevenly, perfectly. Every turn felt like a promise kept. When the song ended, he kissed my forehead. I used to think the war took everything, but maybe it just gave us a longer story. The letters came back into our lives then, the ones I'd written in grief. I decided not to burn them. Instead, we read them together, one each evening on the porch. Sometimes we laughed at my angry handwriting, sometimes we cried. Once he pressed a kiss to a page and whispered, "You loved me back to life before I even knew I was gone." Those letters became a map of pain, patience, and faith. And as we folded the last one, he said quietly, "We should start writing new ones." So we did. We wrote small notes left in each other's shoes or taped to the fridge. Little things like, "Coffee's ready," or "Still dancing for you." The town started calling us the couple from the dance. Someone had filmed that moment at the fundraiser and posted it online. Millions watched, strangers crying over a reunion they didn't know was real. At first, it felt strange to have our love seen by so many eyes. But then letters began arriving, people who'd lost someone, people still waiting. One woman wrote, "Your story made me believe that love can outlive silence." I kept that one taped to the studio mirror. Because that's what possible hearts really means. Love that keeps beating, even when you can't hear it. One evening, months later, we were invited to speak at another charity gala. Ryan hesitated, but I nudged him gently. "They don't need a soldier," I said. "They need a story." So we stood on stage together. He told them about fear, I told them about waiting, and together, we told them about hope, the kind that doesn't promise easy, only enough. When we finished, the audience stood in silence for a heartbeat before clapping. Not the loud kind, but the grateful kind. The sound of people remembering someone they love. Afterward, we slipped outside to the quiet parking lot. The air smelled like rain again. He looked at me with that same half smile from years ago. "You think we did okay?" I laughed softly. "You cried halfway through your speech, Captain. That's better than okay." He chuckled, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. He said, "I know we're already married, but I figured after everything, we could use a reminder." I couldn't speak. I just nodded as he slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like a second chance should. That night, lying in bed, I listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Once upon a time, that sound had belonged only to memory. Now it was real, present, fragile and forever at once. He stirred, eyes half open. "You awake?" "Mm-hmm." He reached for my hand beneath the sheets.
You still believe in promises? I smiled in the dark. Only the ones we dance to. Love stories don't really end. They simply change tempo. One day, you're dancing through fire. The next, you're learning to sway to silence. Our silence had once been grief. Now, it was peace. The summer after Ryan came home, the town hosted the annual Harvest Dance. Same band, same wooden floor, same string lights that always looked like fallen stars. But this time, I wasn't there to watch other couples move. I was there to teach them. Ryan sat near the stage, legs stretched, Kane resting by his chair, watching me the way he used to, like I was something sacred. Every now and then, our eyes met, and that quiet smile passed between us, a language built over years of absence. When the last class ended, the hall emptied until it was just us. The music, the dust, and the kind of hush that only exists after laughter leaves. I turned off the main lights, leaving the fairy bulbs glowing low. He stood slowly, wincing, but determined. Last waltz, he asked. I smiled. Always. He reached for me, and I stepped into him like I'd been waiting my whole life for that exact distance. No crowds, no uniforms, no ghosts. Just us. Two people who had learned that survival isn't the same as living. The record player crackled, then the soft melody began. When I Come Home. I laughed quietly. You really do keep that song on repeat. He grinned. It keeps reminding me that I actually made it home. We moved carefully. His steps slower now, my hands steady where his trembled. Outside, rain tapped against the windows again, our eternal rhythm. He leaned close enough for his whisper to brush my ear. You know what's funny? What? He laughed. I used to think love was the big moments, the promises, the airports, the reunions. But it's this. He tightened his hold slightly. It's breathing the same air as you and realizing I don't need to be anywhere else. My eyes stung. Then we finally got it right. He nodded. Yeah, took us a war and a waltz, but we did. The song faded to its final chord. We didn't stop moving. We kept swaying even after the needle lifted, like the body knew something the music didn't. When we finally stopped, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled. Thank you for finding your way back. Weeks later, I started a new project at the studio, a program for military families. We called it the Promise Dance. Every class began with the same rule. No perfect steps, only honest ones. Wives came with folded flags. Husbands came with prosthetics and medals they didn't talk about. And together, they moved. Not beautifully, not gracefully, but truthfully. Ryan sometimes taught alongside me, showing couples how to hold each other without words. He would tell them, don't count the music, feel the heartbeat. That's where home is. I think that's when I finally understood. Love isn't a story of loss and return. It's the space you keep open for someone, even when you think they'll never walk through it again. One evening after class, I found Ryan standing alone in the empty hall, eyes closed, swaying to no sound at all. Practicing? I teased. He smiled without opening his eyes. Just keeping the promise. Now, years later, whenever people ask how our story ended, I tell them this. It didn't. It just changed rhythm. We still dance, sometimes in kitchens, sometimes in grocery aisles, sometimes in the quiet of our living room when the world feels too loud.
Our scars still ache, but they hum in harmony now. Because love didn't fix us. It taught us how to move with what's broken. This was The Dance He Promised Me, a story about love that survived silence, distance, and time. If it touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Possible Hearts, because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting for their song to begin again.